just let go of control and then you wait for something new to emerge. But that underworld is really dark and you don't see where you're going.
Anywhere where a dream you had that wasn't fulfilled, a broken dream, heartbreak, it all brings you there. And sports psychology has all these great techniques for the smaller losses.
When we watch soccer, something happens that has nothing to do with soccer and everything to do with it. Welcome to the Golden Ball, where depth psychology and the beautiful game help us play life better. My name is John O'Brien, former World Cup soccer player and sports psychologist.
My name is Michiel Klerk. I'm a psychotherapist and co-founder of the Jung platform.
And my name is Akke-Jeanne Klerk. I'm a personal development coach, a Jungian teacher, and co-founder of Jung platform.
And today we are going to explore loss. And we're at the World Cup arrived at the knockout phases, so teams will lose and go home. And that is a bigger loss. That's a big loss. And so we want to distinguish between smaller losses. You make a little mistake in the field, the ball jumps off your feet. How do you respond to that? There's a whole set of ways of being with it. And there are the bigger losses. You miss the deciding penalty in the knockout phase and your team goes home. The whole team goes home. Or if we stretch it even further, you have an injury and you're out for 6-9 months. That is really to do with a broken dream. And something in your identity has radically changed. You're no longer a person who plays at the World Cup. You're a person who's sitting on the couch watching the World Cup. And how do you deal with bigger losses? And we're going to look at that today. And Jeanne, you actually wrote a book about heartbreak because we're talking a bit about heartbreak in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a heartbreak when the Dutch team had to go home. Just like all the players on the field, I was totally invested. I had put my alarm clock, woke up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. to watch the game. I was there, and then they lost, and that feeling is horrible. And the tendency is to get out of that emotion straight away. And of course, the psychologists, depth psychologists, we know that feeling is really something to address. But yes, I've experienced that loss recently.
Yeah, I've also, having lived in Holland for over 10 years, become a Dutch fan. And them being knocked out was emotional for me as well. Right? Like not on a huge scale of a personal heartbreak, but it was emotional. And one thing I noticed, again, like letting myself have the feelings for a bit, but then I also started getting a vision of like, oh yeah, World Cup's going to be over at some point. And then like, there was some perspective shift of like, oh yeah, there's things I kind of want to do. The World Cup takes up a lot of time and energy. And like, there's some things that I want to do afterwards. Just reflecting on my own experience and maybe we could do that during this session of like tracking these different patterns in loss, and how the mind tends to deal with it and how people deal with it differently as well. And I know, Michiel, you had a real interesting framework that I think is not the most common in sports psychology, more from a depth psychology perspective. So I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe that could anchor our conversation a bit.
Yeah, the loss is an opening into the underworld. It's an underworld journey. It's an initiation into a new state. And the underworld is in the Greek mythology is Hades. In the Christian terminology, it would be hell, but it's not the same. But it expresses the deep pain that we go through when we experience bigger losses in our life, heartbreaks. And the natural response is, I don't want to go there. No one wants to go voluntarily into the underworld. And the problem that arises is that when you have a big loss, whether it's you lose a job or you lose a partner or you lose your dream as moving to the next round as a soccer player or fan, is that you immediately find yourself in this territory, the underworld. And it requires a certain way to navigate through that. The classic things, just be strong, just move on, don't think about it, are counterproductive and actually harm yourself, and are in psychology would be called dissociation. It's you're not in touch with the feelings that come. But we also live in a culture that hasn't really taught us, at least the Western culture, it hasn't really taught us how to go through the underworld. And yet it is one of the most important journeys we can take in life. So it's in a little nutshell.
Yeah, and so that underworld that is full of confusion and shock and grief and disorientation. And it's really interesting, when a player who has just entered the underworld after the whistle gets in front of a reporter that wants to criticize or blame. And I think that showed an attitude that we have more often, that we want to blame someone. It's your fault. Like it's the player's a mistake, rather than the first level of empathy. Ouch, that really, really hurts.
Yeah, and both the empathy to self and to the player.
Yeah.
Because in the Dutch team, in the Dutch world, everyone, the first impulse is, we're in the underworld, it sucks here, and it's your fault, Koeman.
Yeah.
And in that way, like, that's also a strategy to get people out of the underworld, I'd say, right? Like if you're feeling some pain and then you don't want to be there, it's kind of blaming someone. Having anger and pointing the finger gives you some sense of control, agency, some power, right? When we're talking about being kind of powerless, like a setback or loss, there's some part of it that you're actually powerless, and you're forced to kind of confront that in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you describe, what is actually a survival mechanism. One is powerless, one is in the underworld, and you want to get out. And so you can get out by blaming others, but another part of you will stay in the underworld. So you dissociate. There's a split. A part of you lives there, and the survival mechanism moves up, starts blaming others, feels good about itself, and now there's a massive internal split.
Yeah, I wonder if it'd be good to unpack dissociation a little bit more, and what the harms in that are for people, so they can understand. Right, we're talking about like letting yourself go into the underworld a little bit. So giving some people information on why that's really necessary and helpful, and the dangers if you don't.
Yeah. So there are, of course, different perspectives to it. But what I see, for example, in clients that I have around heartbreak, is that when they try to think their way out of experiences, when they're willing their way through, so that they're disconnecting from their emotional life, those emotions start having a life of their own. They're no longer part of the conscious experience, but they still continue to have a life, and they might be operating as defense mechanisms because they haven't really felt the experience, and now these defenses kick in order to prevent it happening again. And so they're shying away from opening the heart again. And I think that is a real loss on a personal level, but also for people in sports, that once you've surrendered, there's the opportunity of opening up to that creative impulse again, because otherwise you get disconnected from the body partly, and with it from the impulse.
Yeah, and in soccer that is of course massively problematic if you're not really in touch with your body, or even if you have to take a penalty and you don't feel certain feelings, and then the survival mechanism or the thoughts, the anxiety kicks in, and you start performing less because you haven't gone through the underworld in the appropriate way.
Yeah, I like that. I'm thinking of the word coherence, like when someone seems to have kind of gone through an underworld journey, there's something about them that seems like all parts are there and all parts are working for them. And I think we're talking about sometimes these other parts of ourselves, right, dissociated from, that aren't working for you. And if you have a career that's as demanding as professional soccer and you don't have all your parts kind of online working for you, it's going to be tough. If we're dissociated in some ways, split off from feelings, don't have access to our creative energy, it's going to be tough in the long run.
Yeah, your inner team is not functioning. You're playing with 9 players and 2 are screaming on the sideline. And
Yeah. And I think here that accepting reality is a real important element of it. I think the impulse is to resist what is happening, to resist the loss, to see if you can change things that will alter the outcome. But like in the knockout phase, you can no longer alter the outcome. So somehow you've got to come to terms with the experience. So that acceptance, and not accepting like I like what's gone down my path, but acknowledging that it's there.
So how would you say, for example, Timber made a significant shot next to the goal, but he is now at home replaying the scene, trying to change the outcome in some form.
Yeah.
If I had, and what if, and these are the classic resistant thoughts. What if?
Yep.
How would you work with Timber?
Yeah. So that reflection is really important, but not in the initial stage. That is something for that second stage. Let's have a look. Because in a way, when you're reimagining it, there's also an element as if you were able to change the outcome. So an element of letting go of expectations that have not been met in the past is really important. And it's somewhat similar to self-forgiveness. So I wish I was different, or that it had gone differently. But that hasn't happened. And so I'm letting go of that expectation. I think that is a really important element. And maybe you even repeat that several times, really to feel the pain and the horror and the suffering. And only later, when you've gone through that experience, then later you can let's look what went wrong. What can I learn from it? Because that of course he wants to do.
Well, I think that he initially wants to have the ball go in. I don't think he looks at it initially, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
Yeah, initially he wanted the ball to go in, then he didn't want to be there, right? That was his initial response, like, get me out of this place, wherever I am, right? Now I don't want this experience, right? And then he probably had that part of like replaying it afterwards, right? You're sitting in your hotel room and that thought comes up. I think of that as like trauma theory kind of talks about that, right? It's a situation you didn't want, where there's a lot on the line, not physical life in danger, but like symbolic your symbolic self is put out there on the field, and you did something that wasn't successful. So there's a lot of shame involved. So the mind just keeps coming up with these thoughts and like replaying itself. And I like what you said, Akke-Jeanne, like that's kind of a stage, and you got to kind of work with that a little bit before you can maybe go into a little bit more unpacking of, and meaning making of this experience for Timber or for someone else.
Yeah. Well, that too. And even the meaning making is almost like trying to avoid that emotion. Like I jump to an interpretation and how it affects my life, which is, again, a great question to ask at a later stage. First, you want to be present to the emotion.
Yeah. And that what you say, John, I don't want to be here. That's not exactly the signal of you are there. And how can you be where you are? And people need to be helped with that. And whether it is wherever in your life, you're fired from your job, your cat dies, you have an illness, anywhere where a dream you had that that wasn't fulfilled, a broken dream, heartbreak, it all brings you there. And sports psychology has all these great techniques for the smaller losses. Like Guardiola has the 5-second rule, where you're not gonna linger into being annoyed with yourself that you lost the ball or that the ball jumped off your feet, you didn't pass it well enough. Immediately you learn to step over that to get the ball back. Super helpful with the small losses. The bigger losses, like what we now talk about, have a different tending, and that is very important. And I think our discussion today about it is a really important one.
Yeah. And I love that you said that. And I've seen that a lot in the sport culture, where that kind of skill of the first one, oh, forget it, let it go, next play, like is used for these bigger losses. And it really cuts off people from their humanity in ways and doesn't help them.
Yeah. Or when in a really big thing, when someone dies, I recently heard that someone died and someone said, he's so strong. And I thought, well, I hope his strength is that he really cries hard. I hope that is his strength, and not the strong of like, I can handle this and with muscle and willpower you through big grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important part of a culture shift, I feel like. And in sport, we're getting better at that, What bravery is kind of welcoming feelings and expressing vulnerability, right? It used to be a lot of not showing it. So that's...
Which I can understand, because, again, I'm talking about reporters, because I think there's also room for improvement on the reporter end. Rather than asking critical questions or almost wanting a player to humiliate a player. They're already in a grieving stage. And to ask, what could you have done better? Like that is so tremendously crushing, rather than acknowledging that someone is in pain. And they don't have to be therapists, but there is something of leaving a player in dignity, that they tried their best and that they're more than just that loss in the moment. So there's, I feel very strongly about that.
Yeah.
Well, you also have, especially with the Dutch journalists, you think they need to learn to ask questions.
Yeah.
I'd love to keep us moving along in this kind of arc. I think of it, a journey down the world, and think of some kind of visually like a dip and then a return. And how do you know when the feelings have been acknowledged enough, and maybe it becomes a little more cognitive, where you're you're making interpretations, reflecting, or like shifting your perspective. How do you know what's the other parts of this journey that we can map out for people?
I think it's really important to first acknowledge your defenses, because as long as you don't know what your defenses are around pain and suffering, you think you're going to be okay. So first it's about recognizing what is happening without giving into it. So those might be impulses as well, and you need to separate them from creative impulses. So the impulse to train really hard or get your attention elsewhere. First, you need to know what your defenses are, and then see if you can stay away from them. Step back a little when they show up, because the moment that they melt away or they crumble away, there's different processes for this. You enter this stage almost of nothingness, of the liminal stage of in between. The old things have gone, and maybe part of your old identity has gone, and a new thing hasn't arisen yet. So you're in that in between stage. What you need to be able to do here, or one of the things, is to be okay with not knowing, not knowing where it might go to.
Yeah, I think the big templates in Western literature are, for example, Dante. Dante gets expelled, exiled from his place, and then goes into the underworld and has this whole journey through the underworld. And at the end, he returns as a new person. So the promise in it lies that you will arrive, if you do the journey, as a new person. You go through a transformation, and you are being transformed. So you can give a lot of your ego desires and how it has to go up by just tending to it. And then on a certain moment, you will feel that life is shifting. And all these mythologies of underworld journeys give templates of how this journey goes. And in almost any spiritual tradition, there's some underworld journey. And it's very important to go through all these phases. But give up control, not knowing, and then see what emerges on its own timeline. The rose seed will become a rose. And usually it takes longer than we want to.
Yeah, using the sand tray as I do at times with clients, and thinking of it as kind of a visual map of what they're going through. You see sometimes a lot of disorganization, right? And then sometimes things cohere a little bit and there's disorganization. But then part of it is like, what new thing is maybe growing here? What seed is maybe planted? Sometimes people take babies and put them in the tray, right? As a representative of something that's actually our psyches are working on, like, new part of ourselves kind of emerging in the process. That always seems hopeful when I see a baby enter the tray.
Yeah, new life, huh?
And there is something in that process, of course, of surrendering, giving up of on control. And we talked about identity before, because it is really letting go of your identity. Maybe before the tournament, there was still the dream that maybe this time I'll be the player that also played a World Cup final. And that identity is really, or that idea and that dream is really pulling you in a certain direction. And you might have the age that there are no more World Cups for you. And so it's not just losing the game, but also a personal dream and a personal identity. Like you were the one that was in the or had this promise. So letting go of your identity and really letting go of that control is, of course, super challenging, because it sounds so nice that we're sitting here like, oh yeah, you just let go of control and then you wait for something new to emerge. But that underworld is really dark and you don't see where you're going. And still, and that's why mythology is so helpful, still you walk step by step. You continue.
Yeah, there's some ritual or just repeating or being in it, right?
Yeah.
take the next step. I think of athletes retiring from sport, an area I've been really interested in, right? And sometimes it's like the confusion's just overwhelming, right? That's a underworld experience. Who am I? What do I do? Do I matter anymore to people? Like, what's my future look like? All these things, right? And so one of the things that you're saying is just like, okay, let's just piece by piece go through this step by step, allow space to explore and work through some of these things. But like, what kind of stability would kind of help as we go through this process?
Yeah. And of course, you need others as well. You know, the lovely thing about soccer is that it's happening in a team. And there are others as well. So you're not alone in the experience. So I would also seek out the companionship of the people in the team rather than staying away. Like I don't want to think about soccer for a while, which might be working as well. You know, being surrounded by other loved ones, but the companionship of others in that middle of the journey is really key. And I know, Michiel, that you've said that as well. I think in a poem. That you do not do the underworld on your own, or the grieving on your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
I in one recent heartbreak, I wrote a whole poetry journey of this underworld experience, and so that this art can be a great response to staying with the slow unfolding of what happens, but also allowing the unfolding to happen, because it doesn't happen without your participation. And your participation is what allows nature to do its unfolding. And so there's your own internal work with the different figures that you will encounter. You'll encounter really important figures that probably have lived there already for decades, and even your family system down the line. But it also reminds me that I worked with Malidoma Somé, an African shaman, and he shared that in his tribe, when there's someone has a big loss, the tribe comes together. People stop their work, and they sit in a circle. And the person that has lost someone, or has lost someone, can be in the middle, and they can just lay there and cry and be, and the rest just sits around it. And that gives space to the grief that comes. So grief is not something we do alone.
Yeah, and there's something about other people being there. Think of the psychology term co-regulation, where if they're there, in some ways you can let yourself go a little bit more. Right? That's what happens in the counseling room, happens in this example. And like, I love this about like healing and Jungian psychology, right? There is an element of kind of not being in control, and like you need to kind of let go in some way for the mystery of the healing to happen. And it's something very bodily based that our bodies just kind of know how to do. Right? If we set up the container well, our bodies can kind of do this thing. So it's really an amazing part of our work. I feel honored to see when I see it.
Yeah, and you know, Jungian psychology, there's so much around the ego-self axis, which really is how the ego relates to the part inside the psyche that is experienced as the guiding center. So I often say, how do you relate to the guide within? And certainly when you're in that underworld journey, you want to be attuned to the guide within, where it might suggest or it might have a hint or a suggestion where to go. And to find out about it, you could have a look at your dreams. Like, might there be clues there? Because the ego or the habitual I will probably fall back on what it knows and not surrender that easy to see what new can emerge.
And this is something, tell me if this rings true for you, but when you do it once, you get a little bit of an experience of like, oh, I kind of know how to do this. And you could do it the next time. I remember my first first big heartbreak, right? And like going through that. And then I remember someone telling me, an older man being like, oh, like kind of welcome to the tribe. Like everyone gets it. It's hard, and it's like, oh, and then they kind of provided some sort of template for myself with other losses on how to kind of work through them in some way.
Yeah.
Big differences.
The saying there is really key. The acknowledgement that it's a universal and human experience, that you're not on your own, because somehow otherwise you feel like, what did I do wrong, or what should I have done better? There is some element of taking it too personal, while we all have to deal with losses and loss of dreams and loss of people that we love.
Yeah, and that is where the universal stories as mythologies come in. They're not literal stories. They're stories about psychological journeys that people are on. And there's the psychological journey of going into Hades and what happens there. Or any of these mythologies that show these deep structures in us. And they connect us to the larger family of humanity, where we are not alone.
Yeah, this is kind of the gold on the other side, right? Like, one is more wisdom, more humanity. I feel like there's people who've gone through different struggles and healed from them have a lot to offer our culture, right? In terms of wisdom and stability and a lot of patience or emotional qualities. Yeah, how do you guys see that gold on the other end of going through this journey?
Yeah, there's a lot of gold, and you can also see it in if people don't do it, they don't become a good teammate or as a coach. If a coach doesn't have the real empathy that comes from underworld journeys, they cannot truly relate, and they will have their own survival techniques mapped over others. And so there are some coaches that have not, they don't perform well because they haven't done their underworld journey in a healthy way. Even if they might have the talent, it doesn't go there.
Yeah, I think that is very, very true. When someone has a loss or a death in the family, you would always respond with empathy. But somehow, because it's soccer, something gets rationalized, which is really a defense mechanism. Like, oh, this is your profession, or it's just a game about the ball, and then sort of that gets as sometimes seen as a legitimate way of being critical and being harsh on someone, rather than saying something like that person said to you, John, welcome to you, the human family. Like, wouldn't that be a nice response if we had it towards soccer players as well? Like, welcome to the human family. And gee, that was really a loss of a dream. I had it too. I felt it too. And we make space for it. It's such a psychological term, to make space for it, but it means that we really don't force something too quickly on someone else or on ourselves.
There's a tension between this rhythm, depth psychology, and sports psychology, which, right, is focused on helping often athletes, helping them as people, but with the added idea of like helping them as people and helping them do their job well. Right. And so there's a speed to it where, you're just trying to kind of get back close. And some things don't take as much time. But one thing I've kind of been thinking about lately is like perspective shift. Like, I know, like with Balogun getting a red card in that game, and then afterwards reading through the media, the media was really like, kind of down. Oh, next game's going to be really hard without our striker, right? And if the fans were the team, as a sports psychologist, I'd be thinking, yeah, acknowledge the pain, but then at some point, a perspective shift needs to happen that's better for your performance, right? Well, what do you think would actually help you win the next game? Do you think you have a chance? What factors are going your way? You know, some perspective shift that just brings a little bit of that life and hope and kind of helps people get into a state to perform.
Yeah.
So there is a tension between like how much do we kind of let people kind of go through this journey and facilitate, and how much you try to get them back to their performance.
Well, they don't have to completely live on its own. You can the deeper current is the depth psychological current, and if you don't live that current, the upper life is never gonna flourish to its full potential. Just like striving for gold, if you aim for the wrong gold, it's gonna hurt you, even if you have some success. And the reality is that you can't write poetry for the next week if you play at the tournament. And so you spend some time in the underworld, and then you go, in that example you just gave, to Johan Cruyff's suggestion as every disadvantage has an advantage. And what would be the advantage of this situation be? And then you come with a new strategy where you work. So they're not mutually exclusive, yet they must walk hand in hand for optimal flourishing.
Yeah, so there are really parallel processes that are taking place simultaneously. Or not? Or isn't that what you meant, Michiel?
No, exactly. You have the deeper process, and this team needs to play without their favorite striker. So how are they not going to be down about not having the striker, but get themselves back in the right self-belief that they can play a great game? And what advantages does this give to them? Now they can form a different formation, and they can optimize different qualities that might be helpful with playing the next opponent, and so they have to think different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you advise them to do, John?
The team, yeah, exactly as we're talking about. This is kind of what I'd put in as a kind of short-term setback, where it's like, I don't think you're going to do, it's not a heartbreak in the same way where you're doing deep processing. But yeah, invite them to feel the feelings, acknowledge it. It sucks. It makes me feel this way. I'm worried about it. It's unfair. And then, right, not, hey, look on the bright side. I'm not saying that, right? It's not a forced, like, telling someone to look on the bright side, but it's an invitation to a different perspective. Yeah. But what do you think? We got this game coming up now. What do you think we actually have going for us? You have any ideas? And kind of like a brainstorm. And often, like, with that comes a little bit of a hope, right? Like, oh, you know what? Like, we've been doing pretty good in general. Like, our team's working together. We have 1 player's out. We have, 20 players who are fit, like all these kind of positive things that kind of infuses you a little bit more with that optimistic energy that you want to have going into performances.
Yeah,
well, and next opponent is
one,
also not the strongest one from the tournament. So you're not, US is not facing France.
That's another way to be positive.
yeah. So I think there's something around that journey, and there, of course, in that depth, there's also some question to ask yourself, to feel a little bit of space, or to get a new perspective that it's not all going down. And one of the typical Jungian questions, of course, is what am I invited, or who am I invited to become through this experience, or maybe even because of this experience? What am I invited to develop? How can I mature as a result of this experience? So in relation to soccer, it could be something that the younger people who are experiencing this, and then in 4 years there's another tournament, another World Cup. They come with this experience of loss, and they can teach the others again. And there is kind of resilience, and not resilience in the typical way that it's thought of, like, oh, you bounce back, but really like renewal, the transformative resilience. I'm not sure if
you bounce through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it speaks to the hope in soccer as a place that's helping raise people, right? Helping them learn about life and community. Like I said, if it's done well with a good coach, it's like just enormously impactful for people's lives to be supported in these experiences.
And I think reporters can do something important, because they're really there in first hand. You know, they can help the players, but they can also work, of course, need to work on themselves, but also they're talking to people and supporters at home. So we're in collective grief, and ideally everyone takes their own share, not like, oh, this is yours and I'll do mine, but more if we become better at this, wouldn't that be great?
I love how this is such a passion for you. I love this. This is a thing for you. I hope you could follow it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of territory, and I wonder if there's any final thoughts on dealing with loss. Of course, we can talk for ages about it. You have a great book on it, Akke-Jeanne, in Dutch. Heartbreak, gebroken hart, de psychologie van een gebroken hart. Or a course on Jung platform. So that's a great place for people to move to. But any final thoughts, Akke-Jeanne or John?
For me, I'd say, sometimes you got to let it go and just go to the next thing. Sport is great for showing us that and the value of that, right? Like, don't take it so personal. All right, what's next for me? Other times that strategy is just really going to get in your way. And it would behoove you to take some time with it, open up, kind of let yourself go through the process and come out the other end.
Yeah.
And probably here the hints of the psyche would be nice clues. If your dreams or your experiences are pointing into a certain direction, you follow that direction. So if you have a lot of dreams in which grief comes up, that might be an indication of the psyche that wants you to pay attention to grief. So it's of course not a clear-cut answer for everyone. Every psyche has their own suggestions.
Yeah, and that these processes are not, oh, I now need to live for 2 months in this underworld. I'm going to spend 2 minutes or 5 minutes. You can even put your timer on it, and I'm just going to be with it. And then after 5 minutes, I have to work. So I have to set myself through it. But I have these little pockets, and these little pockets are very medicinal, so that people don't think I'm living there permanently. You live there temporarily in pocket time. And with that, we wish everyone all kinds of great times ahead, and a lot of fun with the games, and time for your own heart when it needs it.